everybody. Yeah, so if you missed a little bit of chit chat between Randy and I at the top, this little subheading of what's changed and what hasn't, some things have changed, but the reality is the things that have changed are just reinforcing best practices that Randy, myself, many others have been talking about for years, for decades, in terms of best practices and things you need to be considerate of. So, for years, email marketers have been looking for transparency and clarity on email deliverability to better understand what it makes to get to the inbox and avoid that spam filter. Well, that's kind of what happened in February. So Google and Yahoo just instituted some best practices that have a lot of people alarmed, and perhaps that's why you're here today. In the end, successful email marketing has always been about trust, building trust, retaining trust, and beyond with your subscribers, and that would include your prospects, your clients, your volunteers, etc. That trust is actually more important than other. And if I can oversimplify what I'm about to teach you, all of this has to do with not just spam, but spoofing. So spoofing is pretending to be who you're not. I'd be willing to bet you have received emails from Target or United Airlines. It's slightly misspelled, right? That's becoming a real problem. These bad actors are ruining everything for everybody. And what's happening is it's lessening the trust that people have in their inbox. It's lessening the trust that people have in their emails that they're receiving. And if you think about it, the Gmails of the world, the Yahoos of the world, they're not wrong for wanting to make sure that trust is retained in email, and especially email marketing, because ultimately that's kind of what they do, right? If you get nothing but junk, including these people pretending to be other people in your inbox, you're going to start not paying attention to the things that are important, and they don't want you to do that. So we're going to cover all of this and more, but let's go ahead and go into detail with our agenda. We're going to be talking about these recent changes, what it means for you. We're going to be talking about how to build and keep your brand reputation in your inbox, and why engagement, remember that word, I've talked about it if you've ever attended any of my trainings, why engagement is more important than ever. So let's dive into the recent changes. So the recent changes, as I said in February, it was mid-February, Google and Yahoo, they did make some changes for bulk senders to protect against spam, fraud, and phishing. These changes will improve email deliverability all around as long as we follow best practices. So what changed? Well, it's it's happening to everyone. This is not just a constant contact issue or one of our competitors' issue. It is happening to everyone. Anyone sending more than 5,000 email addresses, it can affect even more considerably. There is no differentiation between a sales email and a marketing email, et cetera, et cetera. It's all the same. Now, the good news is that as long as you follow best practices, this really shouldn't affect you. And as I said at the top, this is all about building trust. In the end, all this Yahoo and Google stuff is about proving who you are or who you're saying you are is who you are. Now, the good news is I'd be willing to bet everybody watching right now, you're a good person and you work for a reputable organization, and you're not going to go around and pretend that you're Target, right? But you still need to prove you are who you say you are. So why authenticate? So let me actually just pull the curtain back a little bit on that word. Now I'm going to do a little bit more detail in a second, but to oversimplify it, authentication is a way to prove you are who you say you are. And the way that's done, again, I'm oversimplifying it, is through a set of keys and locks. So when you set up authentication through whatever solution you're using, ideally Constant Contact, let's pretend that that's a key, right? And that key, when you hit send and you're sending out your emails, it goes to an imaginary lock that's tied to your website. When the key unlocks the lock, well, that's how the inboxes of the world can prove you are who you say you are. This is all behind the scenes mechanism, these locks and these keys. It's a way of verifying your identity. Benefits is it's going to maximize deliverability. Because you are who you say you are, you're going to be less likely marked as spam by spam filters, and your email will be delivered. It helps you being marked as spam by a human being or by automation, and ultimately it makes you appear more professional. So there's a couple of different actions in terms of your sending email address that you'll want to consider. If you have an email address like the one in purple that's reflective of your domain, you see at jakescoffee.com. Well, our recommended action is that you set up authentication and employ a DMARC policy record. Now, some of you, your head is spinning and like, DMARC, what? Look, let me set it straight. You may have to involve an IT professional here. Unless you are your webmaster, you probably want to talk to the person that helps you with your website, because this is going to be something that involves your website. Now, if you're using a very common, off-the-shelf type web solution, which probably most of you are, there are scenarios where you can actually self-authenticate without having an IT professional involved. Just look for the documentation within your website tool and authentication. It's not very hard. It's a few steps that you have to take, but these are steps that you have to take. Now, Constant Contact is well known for our customer support. We're also well known for our deliverability, but ultimately this is going to be something that we can only help you so far because it involves your website. So you're more than welcome to call us. Our phone number is in the top right-hand corner of every page of Constant Contact, and we'll tell you what Constant Contact side can do for you, and we'll give you some guidance on what you could do with your web solution, but ultimately you're going to want to and need to authenticate through your website. Constant Contact is only one piece of the puzzle. Now, if your email address looks like the one on the right, well, then what we suggest you do if you use Constant Contact is we have a solution for you, which is called CC Send. It's a shared subdomain. Basically, we're giving you our own specialized key that will help you get your email delivered. The ultimate best solution is the purple solution. Having an email address tied to your domain, not only will that help you have better deliverability, but ultimately makes you look more professional. Common question we get around deliverability is, how can we avoid that promotional tab in Gmail? I want to start with saying, and please repeat after me, the promotions tab is not the spam folder. This is a way that Google organizes, and other tools organizes email so people can find what they're looking for more easily. You don't know how your subscribers have their inbox laid out. They could be using things like filters. They could be marking your email to go into the primary tab. Do not rely on the fact that Google and other solutions do this. Many people will go to that promotions tab to find promotions. Whatever you do, you don't want to try to game the system to try to get around the promotions tab. One, it's going to be very hard for you to do that. And do you know who else games trying to get their email delivered? Spammers. The moment you start doing that, you're ultimately going to end up wasting your time and doing something probably that bad actors do. Let's talk a little bit about well, setting up that DKIM, and some of that might sound complicated. The next two bullets are actually going to be the more important, because there is and are things you can control that you can do without involving your IT director, without getting too technical, that you'll want to consider when you're doing email marketing, whether that's through Constant Contact, which we suggest with our 97% deliverability rate. We are here to help you. If you don't use Constant Contact, these are still things you can do and consider. So let's talk about how to build and keep your brand reputation in the inbox. So what makes a good email sender reputation? So not all of this is fancy words like DKIM and authentication. Some of this is just your reputation as well. You have a reputation when you send an email, and I'm going to give you a breakdown of positive behavior and negative behavior that can impact your organizations and your deliverability. So your sender reputation is kind of like a credit score, and in fact, I usually more describe it as a driving record. But it's kind of like your credit record in the sense that it builds up over time. You can have an excellent sender history, but just a few bad email campaigns could do damage to your reputation. Your delivery rate, as well as key email engagement metrics, contribute to your sender reputation. You should aim to maintain a deliverability rate of delivery rate of 95% or higher, and carefully monitor your bounce rate. Now, what is a bounce? If you've ever sent out an email in your life and you got an "I'm on vacation" reply, that is an example of a bounce. Now, I'm going to break down bounces a little bit deeper in just a moment. But what about that engagement? Well, you want to see high open rates, anywhere between 20 and 35%. You want to make sure that you don't rely solely on the open rate, though, as the metric to prove engagement, because opens are notoriously full of false positives and false negatives. Just because somebody opened an email doesn't necessarily mean they opened it. Now, it is a positive interaction you have, but it's not necessarily a proof of true engagement. You want to see a positive engagement metric around opens, clicks, forwards, and responds between 2 to 5%. You want to see a low unsubscribe rate. Now, I'm going to talk about unsubscribes being not as negative as you had thought in just a little while. but under 1%, and you want to see people complaining, a human being marking you as spam, less than 0.3%. You can improve your deliverability rate in a couple of different ways. One, if you're just sending out emails through Gmail, Outlook, Hotmail, etc., all of these rules do affect you. There's also a slew of reasons why you probably want to consider a bulk marketing provider like Constant Contact, because we have a skilled set of human beings that can help you with deliverability issues, along with knowing how the system works to keep our technology on the forefront of getting emails delivered. You also ideally want to use your own domain. So I want to remind you about that Jake's Coffee Shop example where they were sending from Gmail. It is a best practice to use your own domain. Don't know how to get a domain? You can call Constant Contact. We'll point you in a few right directions, but they're fairly easy to obtain. They do carry a fee. We'll have to pay to own your domain, but it is a best practice. And if you've been kicking the can down the road for a while, maybe you don't feel your business or nonprofit is large enough to have a domain yet, you're probably ultimately hurting your brand reputation in a variety of ways by sending email through Gmail, Outlook, etc. You do want to authenticate, so you want to make sure that you follow those simple instructions I told you before on how to authenticate. I will show you where you can find authentication within Constant Contact for those that use Constant Contact or considering using Constant Contact. But one thing you can control today, and I've talked about this in previous presentations through Alignable, is you can control who your email comes from. While you may think that's a small fish in a big pond when we talk about deliverability, it is actually a shark. It is a giant fish, and you can control this fish. So you can change the sender's name when you send out through a bulk email solution like Constant Contact. Here's an example of an inbox. We can see that Rudnick Sportswear, that's the sender of that first email, Starbucks Rewards, this week on TED.com. But here is some sort of business email that came from Tim Wade. Well, who's Tim Wade? If I don't know Tim Wade, if I don't know that he works for this organization that's providing me a parking payment invoice or whatever it is, I very well may mark that as spam. If you think about it, I've said this before if you watch previous trainings, people don't look at subject line to subject line to subject line. They look at who sent this to me, who sent this to me, who sent this to me. And so for that reason, this example below, Rudnick Sportswear, is probably doing the right thing. They're having the email come from the most recognizable name possible. Now, I know that some of you probably want to send an email out from a human being, and there are studies that show that emails coming from human beings do receive higher open rates. But the human being is not the brand in most cases. If you are a solopreneur, if the company's named after you, if you're the entire company, well, yeah, you probably should have the email come from you. You are the brand. In some cases, salespeople and that kind of occupation, you are the brand to the subscribers. But in most cases, the email is best served coming from your organizational name. So when people look at that inbox, instead of going subject line to subject line to subject line, they're looking at from name, from name, from name. They recognize that sender's name and they act on it. And getting people to act on that email is now more important than ever. Again, thanks to these changes with Google and Yahoo. It also is important that when you are sending the email, you are trustworthy in the sense of your subject lines. You want to make sure you're not misleading people with things like a reminder for an email that's not a reminder, or even worse, a forward. You want to focus on when it comes to the subject line, what is in it for them. You also want to avoid things that spammers do, like using all caps. You want to try to limit your punctuation to no more than 3 pieces of punctuation throughout the subject line. Those are things that will trigger a spam filter. So things like the fake reminder or the fake forward, well, that's going to mean human beings mark you as spam, which is definitely something you don't want to do. But things like using too much punctuation, things like using all caps, or even using words that you might expect to see in a spam subject line, even mostly innocent words like free or property, mortgage, weight loss. Words that you might suspect to see in a spam subject line, don't use in your subject line. You can use those words in the body of your email, but you want to think, does this read like a spam? Last but not least, why engagement is so key to getting delivered. Over time, email programs, internet service providers have started to pay more and more attention to what is happening actually with the engagement of your emails. Now, each inbox, Gmail, Outlook, Hotmail, they have kind of a secret sauce. And when I say secret, it is secret. They don't tell Constant Contact They don't tell anybody what their algorithms, so in case you don't know what an algorithm is, it's just a computer program, what their algorithms are looking for in terms of the secret sauce on how they'll mark an email as going into the spam folder, how they'll stop delivering that email, right? They don't share that secret sauce. But in general, it all has to do with engagement. So you want to get people to engage your emails. I spoke earlier about how the open rate is not the end all be all metric because a human being may have opened the email and immediately closed it. Well, a preview in an Outlook, Gmail, etc., that can count as an open. Additionally, back in 2021, Apple, for oversimplification, marks every email as opened. So you certainly can't count as that as proof of engagement. So you want to get engagement in other ways. It will help in a wide variety of ways, not just in deliverability. So one thing you can employ is putting things into your email that people will want to click on. A low-hanging fruit version of that might be something like polls. That means somebody, if you get a response to a poll, and this is something you can actually very easily do in Constant Contact, if you get a response from a poll, one, you might be learning something about your audience that might benefit your business or nonprofit, but you're also proving that people open the email because how else could they take the poll unless they clicked on it with their finger or their mouse? Remember, we want to get people to click into an email with their finger or their mouse. You can also, the most common example of engagement is doing something like you see here with a read more link. You give people just a little bit of information, they have to click a link to read more. Or you can encourage them to share an email on their social media profile or to connect to you on social media. One other thing you'll want to make sure you do is always click images. Any of the images in this email should be clickable, giving people the opportunity to click on a link either like this, or even on the image. Many people try to click on an image, and when you include images that are clickable, you can expect a much higher click rate. Click rate is simply the percentage of people that you sent the email to that opened it and clicked links in the email. Again, we need to have people take that kind of engagement. You want to also consider targeting your email list. Now, I would refer you to previous trainings where we talked pretty deeply on the concept of segmentation and how to segment within Constant Contact. I am going to give you an example or a reminder, because I've trained on it before, on how you can segment your list by clicks. But just to revisit the idea of segmentation, segmentation is basically taking a large list, a large group of people, and breaking it up into smaller lists based on things like behaviors. Have they donated? Have they acted? Have they clicked? Or their demographics, their age, their income, their marital status, or things like geographic, depending on your business or nonprofit. Maybe that will matter to your audience. It will help you not only send more targeted, personalized information, but you're more likely to get engagement from that. If I can go back to my start at Constant Contact back in 2011, the typical way people did email marketing then is they sent out email blasts. Now, I don't mean to scare you with that verbiage. You can certainly still call your email a blast. It's not really the problem. The problem is the concept of a blast, of having one email that serves every single purpose under the sun. The problem with that is thanks to mobile phones, the average audience spends only 9 seconds reading an email. And if the email is mostly meant for somebody else, meaning the content is not targeted to them, well, you're basically training them to ignore not just that email and not just the links in that email, but also to ignore future emails. We need to keep the emails as relevant and on point as possible, and you can do that by segmentation and targeting. Now, I'm going to show you in a little while, as I said, how you can employ something called click segmentation. So what will happen is when somebody clicks on a link in your email, you can automatically copy that contact into a new or existing list so you can do future follow-up. You also want to send consistently. Now, often when I'm training on email marketing, people will roll their eyes a bit and go, "Oh, you probably charge for every email we send, so of course you want to send more consistently." No, we don't. We don't, but you want to send consistently to stay top of mind. You want to stay top of mind because not everybody's going to see every email you send. As I said, I think even in the last training we did together, not everybody's in a place to buy from you right now or donate to you right now. You need to have a regular consistency. We suggest at least one email a month to stay top of mind and to motivate those that are able to buy or donate, give them a chance to do it. The sweet spot is 2 emails a month, 1 email every 2 weeks, but you need to make sure that content is as relevant as possible. At the beginning, it is very important that you follow best practices around how you build your list, how you get your list, how you grow your list. Never, ever, ever buy or rent lists. Can you? Will people sell them to you? Sure, they'll be happy to take your money. But I'll use Randy as an example. Randy gets on some list and I buy that list. I don't know Randy. Randy doesn't know me. I send an email to Randy, even though I paid good money to get Randy's email address along with a couple of hundred other email addresses. Randy doesn't know me. And if we think about it, who sends out emails soliciting for some kind of behavior, whether that's a buy or a donation or whatever we're trying to get? Who sends out email to people that don't know them? Spammers. By buying a list and using a list like that, you're a spammer, right? And Randy's only recourse, well, she could be polite and unsubscribe to it. She could be polite and delete it. And we're going to learn that's not all that great. But she's more likely to just mark it as spam, which we'll learn is the biggest slap in the face possible. Also, when you're soliciting for email addresses on the internet, on social, etc., make sure you set expectations. Let people know they'll receive an email from you approximately every 2 weeks. Remember that things like unsubscribes are actually not a negative. I've mentioned that in previous trainings. And you want to make sure you keep your bounces clean, those emails that come back. There's a variety of different kinds of bounces that you'll receive. Hard bounces, these are ones that you want to, need to address immediately. Well, as quickly as you can. I don't want you getting panicked. Non-existent, that's the non-existent email address, right? So the incoming inbox says, no, that doesn't exist, right? That's going to often be because the domain's no longer there, the company's gone out of business, somebody gave you a fake email address, there's a typo. You can edit a typo if you edit the typo and you get it fixed. So if you notice that it's Yahoo with 3 O's or .com, you can edit those and we'll try to deliver them again. If there's a suspension, so those are going to be organizations that continuously have bounces to that email address, right? So if there's always bounces, well, we suspend that email address because we know it's not getting through. We're trying to protect you. Ultimately, also is undeliverable. So there's just no there. Now, soft bounces are going to be things where you can try to remedy it, right? So it doesn't require you to do anything too overt. So block. That means that there is a block organizationally on emails coming from the sender. So people might block Constant Contact or one of our competitors. One way you can solve that is to call that company and see if they'll unblock. That's going to be kind of unlikely, but that is one recourse. Mailbox is full. Well, you want to make sure that you connect to that contact in some other way and say, hey, clean up your inbox. I will say that in this day and age of cheap data, unlikely many people that are still at a company have their mailbox full. They're probably no longer there. And then sometimes we'll get a bounce that's so cryptic, that's so unusual, and we're not quite sure what it is. We encourage you to review these. Look for those obvious typos. If there's a valuable contact on your list that's bouncing, reach out to them. See if you can get a different kind of email address. There are also common categories that bounce quite a bit. So education, government, healthcare. These are organizations that have hard and fast rules on what kind of emails they allow into their systems. Your best recourse is if it's a .edu as an example, get a different email address if you're seeing it bounce. Regardless, if you don't know why it bounced, if you can't see the typo, if you can't get a new email address, it is in your best interest to delete those contacts because basically you're telling the inboxes of the world that you don't manage your list, that you don't really care, you're not monitoring it. So you want to make sure that you're regularly cleaning up your bounces. For those people that you have been able to send emails to, but that just aren't responding, they're not opening, and especially they're not clicking, you want to segment them too, and Constant Contact makes that easy. You want to segment them as well because you'll probably want to try a different kind of campaign, slightly different subject line, change up the content, offer them something of value, and of course, reach out to them in other ways. They are tuning you out. They're not paying attention. So how does all this connect, right? Certainly you want to authenticate. That's the first step, right? But when people saw this title, when maybe you were motivated, you heard about these changes to Yahoo and Google, and maybe you're a little confused, and hopefully I've cleared up some of that confusion, if not all of it. But you might be surprised I didn't go into more technical things about DKIM and DMARC and authentication. Ultimately, once you set that, that's done. You need to set it, but it's done. It ultimately comes to what you're doing. It comes back to that credit rating. It comes back to that driving record. Authentication is like your driver's license. It's just proving who you say you are. But proving who you say you are may not necessarily mean you're allowed to drive. Your reputation is like your driving record. So it's going to be things like your domain reputation, your IP reputation, but things like how many bounces you get, right? I just talked to you about how you need to clean up your bounces because this affects your sending reputation. How many emails you're sending, how often you're sending, how much engagement you're getting in those emails, how many people are unsubscribing, how many people are marking you as spam, how many spam traps, how many fake email addresses do you have in your mailing list if you bought a list. All of this adds up to different kinds of a scale of positive to negative in terms of your reputation. The most positive thing you can get is the ones in green, having people reply to an email address. If they reply to the email address, they read the email, they're interested. That's telling the Gmails, the Yahoos, etc. of the world, all right, this person wants this email, they are responding to it, they are engaging it, right? That's a very positive action. Or if somebody adds you to their address book. Now, this doesn't happen terribly often, but if they do, that's an extremely positive sign to the Gmails, Yahoos, AOLs, etc. of the world that you want that email because you went through the trouble of putting it in the address. Here, just also in green, opens and clicks, especially clicks. Getting those clicks not only helps you with getting future email delivered, but you actually learn more about your subscribers when they click. Every single time they click, they're telling you, I want this email, I'm interested in this content, and specifically, this is the content I'm most interested in. Said before, you might be surprised that unsubscribes are neutral. If we think about it, one, if somebody unsubscribes, they're likely not going to donate to you. They're likely not going to buy or visit with you, etc. So they're kind of pruning your list for you. But if somebody really wants off your list, there's two ways they could do it. They could unsubscribe, mark it as spam, and we do not want them to do that. That's way over here on the negative side. Somebody deletes the email without opening it. Well, that's telling the inboxes of the world that they are not interested in your content, and you are increasing the odds that your emails, future emails, are not going to get delivered. They're going to get delivered to the spam folder. If they just let the email sit there, and this is the one that worries me the most about all of you, about all of us. They're sending emails out and they're not doing anything with it. That's telling the inboxes of the world that the email's not of value, and they're going to start delivering that to the spam folder as well. And again, marketing as spam is the worst thing they could do. You will be marked as spam. It happens to everyone, but you don't want it happening a lot. Sure, there are people that mistake marking an email spam as unsubscribing, but that's not in volume. That's not a lot of people. Now, this is the secret sauce I talked about before. Looking at who you are, who you say you are is who you are. Authentication is just one piece of this puzzle. This is the bigger piece. Make sure you're building emails that engage people. By building emails that engage people, you're improving the chances your emails will get delivered in the future. So let's recap a bit. For 2024, make sure you're monitoring your email delivery consistently. Look at your reports. What are the benefits to using a tool like Constant Contact? Did you get reports on every email? Make that part of your regular routine. I cannot tell you how many small businesses, nonprofits I've taught who never or barely look at the reports. And if anything, they only look at the open rate. Again, the open rate is not the ultimate metric to pay attention to. Prioritize best practices. Email marketing still has the best ROI in digital marketing, $36 for every dollar spent. But it's important that you put in time to follow best practices. Now, I've shared just high-level best practices. I'd encourage you to monitor the Alignable community where we talk about best practices all the time. And don't try to game the system. Spammers game the system. Now, I'm going to bring Randy back on, talk a little bit about the community group and some other opportunities for you, and then we'll take your questions.